Can LSU fix its kicking woes in time for the Tide? It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, please smash that like button. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Some interesting news with LSU's chief of staff, Beth Rex, leaving the football program. I have some insights, some information, some thoughts on that. Also, Brian Kelly and Kale DeBoer update their bye week. And interestingly enough, Kale DeBoer talking about the lack of discipline on his team. Could that be something worth watching when the Tide come to Baton Rouge a week from Saturday? But something we all have to keep an eye on after this last Saturday is the kicking game. And, it's interesting because if you listen to any content that I've done over the years, either my radio show here on Locked On or anywhere, one question I often ask when I'm doing game previews, and I'm interviewing a guest who covers another team, I'll generally phrase it something like, okay, Alabama down 2, there's 4 seconds left. You're lining up for a 47-yarder from the left hash. How confident are you he's going to make it? And that's usually a pretty good indicator of the level of confidence and how good a team is in the kicking game and in special teams. And before this past Saturday against Texas A&M, if you had asked me that question about Damian Ramos, I would have been like, man, he's virtually automatic. Against Arkansas, he was 4 for 4 and won the SEC Special Teams Player of the Week. But so often, as it is in special teams, particularly with the kicking game, the kicker gets all the credit and sometimes all the blame as well, and that's not always the case. For example, earlier this year, Damian Ramos missed a kick where the entire timing of the snap and hold was off, and so it caused Ramos to speed up his mechanics, and he missed the kick. And Brian Kelly said point blank, look, and he wasn't pointing out Slade Roy. Slade Roy's been magnificent during his 3 years here in Baton Rouge as the long snapper. Was one that got away. It's hard to be completely flawless in everything you do all the time. But Ramos is so meticulous in his mechanics that Brian Kelly talked about how that got messed up because of the timing of the kick. So it's interesting, though, when you look at what happened against Texas A&M, where Ramos was 1 for 3. Of course, he had the 2 misses. And then there was also the snap that went off of Peyton Todd's helmet because their operation wasn't right. Slade Roy snapped the ball before Peyton Todd was ready. Maybe Peyton Todd made the error there. I don't know. Brian Kelly certainly was giving Peyton Todd the business on the sideline. But Brian Kelly was asked when he met with reporters this week about that, about how it went so wrong against Texas A&M and what they might be able to do to fix it.
The battery is the snapper, the holder, and the kicker. We've got to get them together as one. It's not one without the other. All 3 of those guys have to work in unison, and they were out of sync. As well as they were working the week before, I don't know what happened. But they were out of sync. And, we had the untimely snap. We didn't have a great hold. But as you know, it's the kicker who's going to get the blame because he's the one ultimately that is out there getting the credit or the blame. But it's the battery that was highly ineffective for us against Texas A&M. And that battery, we got some work today on it, which, you very rarely put that group out there on an off week. But we had to get them out there today and spend a lot of time with them. Yeah.
In the NFL, they change kickers and things like that all the time.
Yeah, they fire them.
Yeah, you don't have that. You don't have that luxury. But I mean, are you?
No.
I guess where I was going. Are you considering maybe trying someone else at a snapper or a holder or something like that?
Yeah, in the NFL, what they do is, as I said, and I'm not making light of this because you're losing a job, but there's a bank of long snapping professionals, and they can just dip into that bank and pay them. We don't have that. Like, you can't, like, just go pick somebody out of the dorms and say, come on in. We just don't have those guys. So what you really have to do is work harder with those guys and, trust that they're going to make progress and work as a unit. They're all capable. It was a bad night. And that night can, as I said, you can't have a night like that. For me to have a night like that when they were so good all year is really troubling. But at the same time, we're going to get it fixed.
After the Arkansas win, if you were here, the word I used to describe why that was such an encouraging win was consistency. Great teams, not good teams, great teams and programs develop consistency. You're not up and down. There's so many examples of contrast where you have a big win and the next week you have a letdown spot, maybe you lose. Arkansas was a great example of that. Arkansas had a giant win over Tennessee. They had their bye. LSU went up there and put them in a chokehold. They're not a good team or a good program. They're not consistent. And after beating Ole Miss, LSU go and beating Arkansas, it made you felt like LSU is consistent. And then the Texas A&M game rolls around with so much on the line. So developing consistency is the challenge. But what's so interesting about the place kicking situation is they have been so good this year. Damian Ramos, up into this point in the season, before Saturday against Texas A&M, he was 12 of 14 on field goals. And the two misses, one was against Nichols and one was against Ole Miss. And Brian Kelly even said point blank, the one against Ole Miss wasn't on Ramos. So really the only miss on the season was the miss against Nichols. So he's been so good. And even after the 1 for 3 day Saturday, he's still at 76.5%. He's 13 of 17 on the season. But when you look at what happened, it's almost like with Nussmeier. Nussmeier's been outstanding all season, but he had that bad quarter and a half that lets you know that's in there, and it can be that. And it's so critical against Alabama because if this game is close, as many anticipated it will be. I mean, we told you the opening line, the point spread on this game varies from anywhere LSU 2 to Bama 2.5. So you're talking about the odds makers picking this to be a field goal game either way. So when you have an opportunity to put points on the board and you can get Damian Ramos to look from inside of 50, snap, hold, kick, all have to be flawless. And that's why Brian Kelly and the staff were working him out this week, when, as he said, most of the time on an open date, they're not working that out. And the flip side of it is you look at Graham Nicholson from Alabama, and Graham Nicholson was a Groza Award winner a year ago. He's the best kicker in college football. Now, he's just 4 of 6 on the season. He hasn't had many attempts this year. So as long as 47, but again, he's only attempted 6. So let's see what it might look like if Bama has the opportunity for a big kick in Tiger Stadium with 102,000 people yelling against you instead of for you. But that's certainly an area of the game where after Saturday, we've all got to hold our breath a little bit. Now, they worked on the kicking game, but they worked on a lot of other things, including how to finish and discipline, which you'd expect in an open date. What do you hear what Kale DeBoer had to say about his team's discipline, why this could be a major factor when Bama comes to Tiger Stadium a week from Saturday? It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. That's FanDuel. Brian Kelly and Kale DeBoer both met with reporters on the SEC coaches teleconference on Wednesday. And Brian Kelly started things off by talking a little bit about what they're focusing on here in the bye week.
We get back to some, certainly some technical work, fundamental work. And then, we get a little bit of a peek at Alabama. So a combination of both. We try not to, spend too much time on the field. We want to get some recovery in as well. And, for a number of these guys, they're catching up academically as well.
Did get a little peek at Alabama. He mentioned that there. But a lot of it is working on what you do well. And one of the things LSU, quite honestly, has done well, but they didn't do on Saturday, is finish. Working on closing the game, which is something Brian Kelly was also keenly aware of.
We're working on the things that will require us to play better for 4 quarters. Certainly excited about the opportunity to, host Alabama in a week. And, when you play in the SEC, you've got to play for 4 quarters. So we're reminded of that. We've been on the other side of that where, we were down on a couple of ball games and came back and were able to win them. So it was an unfortunate lesson, but one that we'll build off of and get ready in this bye week to compete and continue to work towards winning an SEC championship.
You know what I found interesting? So I went and did the number crunching. By the way, if you're listening, you all know this, but if you're watching on YouTube, this was the SEC coaches teleconference. So you're not seeing Brian Kelly because this is just a teleconference. This isn't a video media availability. But I went and pulled these numbers about how LSU and their opponents score by quarters. So just to illustrate this, when you talk about LSU closing and how good they've actually been at this year. In the first quarter of games, LSU has scored 57 points. 8 games, 57 points in the first quarter. 90 in the second quarter. 52 in the third quarter. 57 in the fourth quarter. So pretty consistent. In the first, third, and fourth, 57, 52, 57. 90 points in the second quarter. So clearly LSU gets their mojo going in the second quarter. Defensively, 31 points in the first quarter, allowed. 68 in the second quarter. 37 in the third quarter. And 43 in the fourth quarter. So all that to say, I don't know if necessarily the problem with LSU has been finishing. I think the problem with LSU at times has been finishing the first half. But similarly, LSU's highest scoring quarter of games this year has been the second quarter. And when I look at it, it's pretty easy to see the disparity in the wins and losses. Against Southern Cal, LSU's first loss, they allowed 14 points in the fourth quarter. Against Texas A&M, LSU's second loss, 17 points in the fourth quarter. Nichols didn't score in the fourth. You outscored South Carolina 14-9 in the fourth quarter. UCLA didn't score. South Alabama didn't score. Ole Miss just managed a field goal. And Arkansas didn't score in the fourth quarter. You've been really good defensively. In 6 of your 8 games, you've been really good defensively in the fourth quarter. The 2 games you lost, you weren't. The only two games where you've allowed double digits in the fourth quarter. 14 to USC, 17 to Texas A&M. And that's the difference in your ballgame. So, yes, they have been very good at finishing by and large, but it's pretty obvious the numbers don't lie in that instance. The 2 games they've lost have been the 2 games where they allowed double-digit points in the fourth quarter. Now, as for Kale DeBoer, he's got his Alabama team coming off or in their bye week as well, coming off a big win over Missouri this past weekend, a 34-0 win. But one of the interesting things that Kale DeBoer was asked about was his team's discipline. I want you to hear this because after this soundbite, I'm going to give you a little context on why this has been such a big deal around Tuscaloosa, that word, discipline.
I can tell you our team has an extremely high level of discipline in a lot of those ways that I'm mentioning, but there's been a lot of times, right, where sometimes our awareness or just understanding emotional discipline at times as well has been something we haven't been as sharp as we need to be, with. And I think we've gotten extremely better, but there's penalties still being called and things that are happening that we just got to continue to improve on.
All that became a talking point because a week ago after Alabama lost to Tennessee, stories started to emerge out of Tuscaloosa that Alabama was back to focusing on the little things, tucking in their shirts and showing up to meetings on time. Those are things that I can't even imagine would ever be a consideration under the previous regime. And I'll go back to something that we talked about at SEC Media Days. I'll never forget this conversation with my buddy Ryan Fowler from over at Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa. And at Media Days, Ryan told me, being around Alabama, just a totally different vibe and different air. It's like this burden has been lifted off of everybody's shoulders. Everyone's just a little lighter, a little looser under DeBoer than they were under Nick Saban. And he was painting it like that was a good thing. And the point I made is, well, that's why you're in trouble. Because that expectation throughout the entire organization that Nick Saban had for everybody, from his coordinators, his starting quarterback, all the way down to whoever, makes the food or cleans the building, anybody, there is that expectation. And Kirby Smart has instilled the same expectation at Georgia, by the way. Like, if you ever notice, players don't have shirts untucked under their jerseys. Like the undershirt under their shoulder pads are never untucked. They're always tucked into their pants. Pay attention to that if you never noticed. That's a Nick Saban thing that Kirby carried to Georgia as well. It's the attention to detail. If you're going to have that much attention to detail on the little things, of course you will on the big things as well, which is why the fact that Alabama is 129th in the country in penalties this year has a lot of people concerned. That's why people are asking about discipline. Just to give you a little more context, 69 penalties in 8 games for Alabama this year. There are only 4 teams in college football that have committed more penalties than has Alabama. San Diego State, the University of Texas San Antonio, Nevada, and New Mexico. That's it. Those are the only 4 teams that have committed more penalties than Alabama. So, Tiger Stadium, if you're going to be in that number in Tiger Stadium a week from Saturday when Alabama comes in, you can have a big impact because Alabama will commit silly penalties. It's also on LSU to make sure they don't, because that number's ratcheted up, albeit in road environments. Hopefully it's a little better, as you would expect, in Tiger Stadium. But still, a couple things to file away. The kicking game, penalties. Not the talking points that we're really focusing on with LSU, Alabama, as so many are focusing on the quarterbacks, the running game, LSU's inability to run, Bama stopping the run, all that stuff. Penalties, the kicking game. If it's close, those could end up being the difference. We'll continue to watch, continue to move along here, Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, and our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans like you and me. The fans who are the first in the parking lot, who are the last to leave. We see you. Check out 5 Hour Energy. How about the fan fuel of the week moment? Maybe Aaron Anderson, 76 yards for a touchdown. That was kind of the highlight. None really in the second half for the Tigers, but huge. And then obviously you want to be rip-roaring ready to go when the Tide come to town. Make sure you get your fan fuel. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available 5hourenergy.com and shipped nationwide. As we wrap up today's episode of Locked On LSU, one more quick note from Brian Kelly on the SEC Coaches Teleconference. He did confirm that LSU football chief of staff, Beth Rex, has resigned. Here's what Brian Kelly had to say, and I'll come back and give you some context.
It really doesn't. We've shifted some responsibilities internally, and we'll look to augment the staff after the season, but very little change relative to the day-to-day. We've asked some support staffs to pick up a little bit more responsibility during the season, and then we'll look to augment the staff at the end of the season.
So Beth Rex had the title of Associate AD and Chief of Staff. If you're not familiar, Beth Rex was effectively Brian Kelly's right hand. She was with him at Cincinnati. She went to South Bend, was there for all 12 years he was at Notre Dame, came to Baton Rouge when he got the LSU job, and she has been the chief of staff here now into Kelly's third season. If you look at her bio at lsusports.net, let me read this line, okay? 2 lines. It's short. Rex serves as the chief of staff for the LSU football program and oversees all aspects of the program. She also serves as the primary point person for all matters related to Kelly and the LSU football program. I don't know that could be any more all-encompassing for her role. Primary point person for all matters related to Kelly and the LSU football program. Oversees all aspects of the program. That was Beth Rex's role. Now, I will tell you, the news of Beth Rex resigning, while that's just now, Kelly's just now confirming it, Beth Rex left the football program maybe almost a month ago now. It's been a little while. And it's just now breaking because I'm not sure that that's the type of thing that the day-to-day fan would know a lot about or really care a lot about. But what I can tell you is, to the best of my understanding, what happened here is when LSU brought Austin Thomas back to LSU, back into the program, a lot of the duties that were Beth Rex's duties were sort of reassigned to Austin. So I think for Beth Rex, she went from having this role where I just read for you, I mean, it was all encompassing, to, okay, well, now she's deferring some of that authority. And I don't know that it's a power struggle. I don't mean it for it to sound like that. But this is Brian Kelly's chief lieutenant who's been with him since Cincinnati and a dozen years at Notre Dame and came to Baton Rouge now for 3 years. So when she leaves the program, it's going to be noteworthy and people are going to talk about it. And it's worth mentioning. What I will say is the support staff that Brian Kelly has built at LSU, and quite honestly, that members of the coaching staff and the athletic department have helped him build. For example, bringing Austin Thomas back into the fold. That was a Scott Woodward move. Austin Thomas is Scott's guy. And that's why Austin came back. And he's as good as there is with all of these different management roles as far as overseeing recruiting or all the operations of a football program. So LSU is in very good hands. I know a lot of people looked at and you see that Beth Rex had been with Brian Kelly since Cincinnati, and then she abruptly resigns, or seemingly abruptly resigns. And you might go, oh, what's going on? Is there more to this, more than meets the eye? No, there's not. The athletic director wanted to hire Austin Thomas and sort of integrate Austin back into the football program. And I believe, and Austin's fantastic. I mean, there's a reason he's had so many high-placing jobs at places like LSU and Southern Cal and Tennessee and Ole Miss and Baylor. And LSU's now brought him back for a third stint. He's great, and LSU's better because of it. Then that's just some natural attrition and turnover that happens. So if you saw the headline, don't read too much into it. LSU is in really good hands. Okay, that's going to do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. If you're new, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And be sure to let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.